Hey Valley Middle School, welcome back to another G675 math lesson. Tonight we're going to be calculating simple interest. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at our trivia question of the day. Just for fun, when did the iconic Harley-Davidson company start producing motorcycles? We'll be back to the answer to that and much more after our instruction. Tonight officially our target is I can compute simple interest. Let's do this thing. Casey wants to buy a MacBook Pro for college. He doesn't have enough money, but his clever brother Connor offers to loan him the money at only 15% interest for the 4 years that he's in college. Connor also convinces Casey to buy a top-of-the-line MacBook for $2,000. How much will this computer cost Casey with interest? Well, to calculate interest, you need to know this formula that the principal times the rate times the time is equal to the interest. Well, let's look at that more carefully. The principal is the amount that something costs or that you borrow or invest, and the rate is the interest as a decimal. T is for time in years, and I is the total interest. Still seems a little confusing? Let's put some numbers in. Casey borrows the entire cost of the computer, $2,000, from his brother. He pays 15% interest. You express that as a decimal, so 15% as a decimal is 0.15. Times the number of years, or time listed in years, is 4 years. Multiply those all together, you have $1,200 in interest. Now that may not seem like a lot in and of itself, but when you add $2,000 for the cost of the computer, plus the $1,200 interest, the simple interest would be $3,200 is what that computer would cost Casey. If you divide that amongst the 4 years, 4 times 12 gives you 48 months, he'd have to pay $66.66 per month. That's a great deal for Connor because he's earning interest. That's a bad deal for Casey because he's paying interest. Let's look more carefully at that word interest. So interest is the amount of money paid or earned for the use of money. Good interest is when you put money in the bank and you earn interest. The bank pays you to have that in there. Or in the case of Connor, he was earning 15% interest. Bad interest is when you have to pay it because you're using somebody else's money. Casey was paying 15% interest. That's bad. Simple interest, well, that's just the interest paid or earned on the principal or the deposit or the amount borrowed. I calculated simple interest. Tomorrow night, we're going to calculate compound interest. That's the interest based upon the principal and accumulated interest. And of course, that's going to be more money because you're paying interest on the principal and other interest. The principal, that's the amount borrowed or invested. So here's a look at that equation again. So the interest that you pay is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. All right, let's go on the ultimate shopping spree and buy a Chevy Colorado. Connor was looking at buying this truck recently. The total cost was $35,000. That was the sticker price in the window. He had $3,000 in his bank account, so the total amount he would have to pay or borrow from the bank would be $32,000. So $35,000 plus minus the $3,000 in the savings. So he's got $32,000 to loan. So he calls up the bank. The bank tells him 6% interest. So let me just get some things down here so we can take a look at it. So he would have to finance or borrow $32,000 from the bank at 6% interest. Well, that's 0.06 times 5 years. He chose 5 years as a fair amount of time because it's a new truck. It'll last a long time. Multiply that together, $9,600 total interest, almost $10,000 in interest. That's a lot of money, especially when you consider that you have to add that to the principal, the amount of the truck. So if you add those two together, the truck would cost $41,600. If you took that and divided that amongst the 60 months, 5 times 12 gives you 60, 12 months in a year, 5 years. The payment would be nearly $700 per month, $693.33 to be exact. Yikes. And it only gets worse because you forgot. He already had paid $3,000 down. So here's the total cost of principal and interest. Here's the $3,000 he took out of his bank account. Plus he'd have to pay tax, $2,500 in tax, approximately $500 in license fees. That truck would cost probably about $47,600 by the time he was all done with it, paying interest, tax, fees. Wow. So thank you, Mom and Dad, for driving you to hockey practice in that nice Suburban or whatever vehicle it is, because most of the time parents have to borrow money to buy vehicles, and it costs a lot of money. Does it pay to shop around? It absolutely does. I recently bought a truck, and I only paid 1.99% interest. for 5 years. Well, let's think about that. If I was buying that same truck that Connor bought at $32,000, let's think about that. There's $32,000. That's our principal times 1.99%. Well, that's 0.0199, less than 2%. Times the 5 years, the interest is only $3,184. It's less than a third. But think about it. Before our interest was 6%, now it's 2%. Of course, it's going to be a lot less. Look at the impact. There's your principal. Here's your interest. Total cost, $35,184. Sorry about that. Total payments would be $586. So you're saving $100 a month on that by finding a better interest rate. All right, I think it's time for you to try a few. Why don't you try calculating the simple interest on these 4 problems right here? Some of them, the first 2 are principal borrowed. Last 2 are money invested. And it doesn't matter. It's the same formula for either. Go ahead. I see that. All right. If you borrowed $400 at 3.67% for 2 years, $29.36. If you borrowed $770 at 16% for 6 months, did you remember to put 6 months in as a fraction? Because it's half a year, right? So you have to make that into a decimal of 0.5. What? You don't get it? All right, let me do it for you real quick. So just clear this out. So you'd put the $770. You'd multiply that times 0.16, because that's your interest rate. Times, instead of 1, you're going to put 0.5, because 6 months is half of a year. So that's how you get your $61.60. All right. Now you're going to invest some. $4,000 at 2.2% for 4 years would give you a return of $352. That's good interest. You'd earn that much. $10,000 at 5.9% for 18 months. So this would be 1.5 years, 18 months. Gives you a total of $885. All right. Yeah, but how about these kinds of problems? Where you have to actually find the interest rate. Well, as long as you have that formula PRT equals I, as long as you have 3 of those variables covered, you can find the 4th. So my cousin Tommy Tutos buys a Harley. He finances $4,000 for 4 years. His payments are $100 per month. He acts tough, but unfortunately he's not very bright. Tommy has no idea what interest rate he's paying. Can you figure it out? Well, let's help Tommy Tutos here. We have to find the total of interest and principal. So if you took the 48 payments that he makes of $100, he's got a total of $4,800 that he's going to pay for this Harley. Let's think about that. If we subtract the interest, $4,800, and the principal, you're going to get a total of $800. So this is the amount of interest that he had to pay. So now we can start, we've subtracted, we can start to kind of plug things in here. So let's set up an equation. Here's that. The interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. I think we've got all the numbers we need now. So here's the interest he paid, $800, $4,800 total minus the $4,000 principal. So here's the interest of $800. The principal was $4,000 times some rate, we don't know what it is, times the 4 years. This was 48 payments or 4 years. Well, now we can take and simplify that. We can take the 4,000 times the 4, and we come up with 16,000 times R is equal to 800. Now we've got a simple one-step equation here. Divide both sides by 16,000. We end up finding that 0.5 is equal to R. What does that really mean? Well, that means that it's 5% interest he was paying. Well, it's not a horrible interest rate, but you really should know what your interest rate is before you sign up to pay it. Because you could probably find a simpler interest rate too, or a cheaper interest rate, maybe at a different bank or a credit union. All right, time for your time for your ticket to the show. Tara buys a $1,000 savings bond. After 10 years, the bond is worth $1,250. Find the simple interest rate for her bond. Go ahead and see if you can figure that out. What? You're struggling a little bit? All right, let me just help you just a little bit here. So here is, I'm going to move this over here. Let's put it here. Here's the interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. Does that help? You're going to have to subtract to find out how much interest she paid. All right, let me help you a little bit more. So if you take the $1,250 and you subtract the $1,000, you find out that she earned $250 in interest. Her principal, so I'm going to move myself up here. The principal then was $1,000. That's the amount she invested. Her rate, we don't know. We're going to solve for that. And the time was 10 years. I'm not going to give you any more, no matter how much you beg me. Go ahead, combine, make that into a one-step equation and find out what the interest rate was. It's just like the Tommy Two Toes question. You can go back, take a look at that. All right. Time for the just for fun question. Let's put myself back in the corner where I belong. When did the iconic Harley-Davidson company start producing motorcycles? Well, in 1901, William Harley, age 21, he drew the first blueprint for an engine that would fit onto a bicycle. 1903, William Harley and Arthur Davison they had this little shack. This was at 10 by 15 wooden shed. They started selling their bicycles with motors on them. Later, their brother Walter joins in. He's also a Harley. Sorry, he was a Davidson. Sorry, Walter Davidson. Here's take a look at it. Pretty cool, huh? Imagine riding that to school. Tell you what, I'd rather have that and sitting in my living room or in a museum, because that is worth a lot of money. That's the first Harley Davidson motorcycle. Just a bike with a motor. All right. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great evening. Bye.